Hello students, today we are going to deal with the first unit of the textbook. The name is Hornbill. It is the name of the textbook and this is the first lesson. The title of the lesson is The Portrait of a Lady. Portrait, you understand, it is a picture, drawn picture. The author is Khushwant Singh. The name Khushwant Singh is a great literary person and he has written many novels also. If you want to find out something more about him, you can always go to the Google and you can find out much information about him. In this lesson, The Portrait of a Lady, he has given vivid description of his grandmother. Why it is a portrait? In a way, it is not a picture, but he has given a word picture of his grandmother. He has described the appearance of his grandmother, his relations with his grandmother, love shared between the two. That means Khushwant Singh as a child and the grandmother. So let's begin. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. See what a fantastic sentence it is. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. So he wants to say that my grandmother was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for 20 years that I had known her. That means Khushwant Singh says, for 20 years I have seen my grandmother. And as far back I can remember, she was always old. And wrinkle you understand. Wrinkle means having wrinkles on her face. ચહેરા ઉપર કરચલીઓ હતી, that is wrinkled, કરચલીઓ હતી. And he remembers the memories since last 20 years. And during this period, she was always old and her face was wrinkled one. People said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. Khushwant Singh has heard that she had once been young. Naturally, if today we meet any old person, naturally that person would have been a child also sometimes, would have been young also. And people kept on telling Khushwant Singh that this grandmother was young also. And once in her time, she was pretty when she was young and even had a husband. But Khushwant Singh says, but that was very hard to believe. That means it is quite absurd to believe it. That means he is not able to digest it. Because since last 20 years, he has been in a touch with a person and that person is old, that person is wrinkled face. So it is very hard to believe that this person can be young also, this person can be pretty and this person can have a husband also. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. So there was a drawing room in the house and there was a mantelpiece and the portrait, that means a picture of his grandfather, was hanging there. And when he looked at that picture, what did he found? He wore a big turban. What was there in the picture? The grandfather was having a turban. Turban, you understand, pagdi. Pagdi પહેરેલા હતા and loose fitting clothes because they are Punjabi. So the clothes are loose fitting. So what he sees from the photo of the grandfather is that he has been wearing a turban. પાઘડી પહેરેલી છે અને એના કપડાઓ છે લૂઝ ફિટિંગ કપડાઓ છે. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest and he looked at least 100 years old. અને દાદાની જે દાઢી છે એ વ્હાઇટ સફેદ થઈ ગયેલી છે. And it covered the best part of his chest means here the best means most of the part. Most of the part of his chest has been covered by the long beard. And when he sees the photo of the grandfather, he thinks that he feels that this person is 100 years old. He did not look the sort of the person who would have wife or children, but he looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. See the sentence, what he says. When I look at the photo of my grandfather, it is very hard to believe that he can have only a wife and some children, but he is so old that we can imagine, or at least the writer can imagine, that he has lots and lots many grandchildren. As for my grandmother, being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. And what does he say about his grandmother? If I think my grandmother was young and pretty, I think it is unbelievable. Here, revolting means unbelievable. Revolt, you understand, badwo karvo te, but it is not in the sense of that revolt. He says it is unbelievable. The thought is unbelievable. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child, and this grandmother often told Khushwant Singh about the games she used to play when she was a child. But that seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us. દાદીમાં ઘણી વખત કહેતા કે અમે નાના હતા ત્યારે ફલાણી ગેમ્સ અમે આવું રમતા. And when the author heard it, he found all the stories quite absurd. And આ stories and fables you understand, બોધ કથાઓ જેને કહીએ, when you read it, it is the story itself is unbelievable, but it has some lesson at the end. Prophet means priest, ધર્મગુરુ કે પૈગંબર, આવી બધી વાર્તાઓ કહેતા હોય એવું અમને લાગતું હતું. And these stories about the games, they seemed quite absurd. આ વિચિત્ર લાગતી હતી, undignified, that cannot be believed. એવું લાગતું હતું. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. આ દાદીમાં હતા ને, it was the physical structure was short. એ ઠીંગણા હતા, ફેટ, થોડા જાડા હતા અને સ્લાઇટલી બેન્ટ યુ અન્ડરસ્ટેન્ડ, કમરેથી વૃદ્ધ માણસો જે ઝૂકી જતા હોય એવા પ્રકારના હતા. Her face was crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. You understand what is crisscross? If I draw the lines like this is crisscross. So what does the writer say? When I look at the face of my grandmother, I find that it is a crisscross of wrinkles. કરચલીઓ એના ચહેરા ઉપર હતી, running from everywhere to everywhere. આખો ચહેરો, it was wrinkled one. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. And when I look at my grandmother, I always think that she cannot be young, she cannot be pretty. આ નાના હોય, that imagination itself is very revolting. It is unbelievable, it is undignified, and it is absurd if we think like that. She was young. એટલે આ આવું શું કામ વિચારે છે? કારણ કે પાછલા 20 વર્ષથી એ દાદીમાને જુએ છે અને દાદીમા આવા જ હતા, ઠીંગણા હતા, જાડા હતા, કમરેથી વળી ગયેલા હતા, ચહેરા ઉપર કેટલી બધી કરચલીઓ હતી. અને એવું ઇમેજિન કરવું કે દાદીમા ક્યારેક નાના એવા હશે, young હશે, pretty હશે, it was quite absurd. Old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older. અને દાદીમાં અત્યારે એટલા બધા વૃદ્ધ હતા, ટેરિબલી ઓલ્ડ. Now she cannot become further older and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. See, this is the reality. That thing has become stagnant in the author's mind. આ વસ્તુ લેખકના દિમાગમાં સ્થિર થયેલી છે કે પાછલા 20 વર્ષથી દાદીમાં બસ આવા ને આવા જ છે. So this is the description of the physical appearance of this grandma. That's why it is called the portrait. Portrait, you understand, that is the picture. So this is the vivid word picture of the grandma. So how she was? She was short, she was fat, she was slightly bent, and there was crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. And for last 20 years, she looked like this only. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. See this sentence. She could never have been pretty. Pretty? દાદીમાં રૂપાળા હોઈ શકે? No, that is not possible. But she was always beautiful. My grandma was beautiful. Do you know what is the difference here? This pretty describes the physical appearance. But this word beautiful, it is something internal. Internal beauty was extraordinary. વૃદ્ધ થઈ ગયેલા છે તો હવે નાના હોય ત્યારે જેવા રૂપાળા યંગ ચહેરો એવું તો અત્યારે હોય નહીં. So he says he could never have been pretty. If I imagine my grandmother was very pretty, it is really absurd to think, absurd to believe, or absurd to feel. Yeah, but she was so beautiful. She was a beautiful lady by heart. She hobbled about the house in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop, and the other telling the beads of a rosary. Now, something more has been described about the walking style, about the habit of resting her hand and another hand. What does he say about the walking style? She used to hobble about the house. Hobble, you understand? આપણે કહું ડગુમગુ ચાલવું, એટલે એ રીતે જે ચાલતા હોય છે, દેટ ઇઝ વોક લાઇક અ લેમ પર્સન. યુ અન્ડરસ્ટેન્ડ ઇટ? લંગડો વ્યક્તિ કેમ ચાલતો હોય, દેટ ઇઝ કોલ્ડ હોબલિંગ. She hobbled about in the house in spotless white. Now see, spotless means clear, white means white dress. See, Dadima now is a widow. And there is a custom in India, if a lady is widowed, then she has to wear white or the black clothes. Here, she is wearing white clothes. And what is the walking style? She is hobbling in the house. આમ લંગડો વ્યક્તિ જે રીતે ઘરમાં આમ ડગુમગુ ચાલતા હોય, દાદીમાં એવી રીતે ચાલતા હતા. And the attire, the clothes was spotless white. And then one hand resting on her waist. Waist, you understand, કમર. એક હાથ એને કમર ઉપર રાખેલો હોય, કમર ઉપર રાખીને ચાલતા. Why? Is it? She wanted to balance her stoop. દાદીમાં છે કમરથી ઝૂકી ગયેલા છે ઉંમરને કારણે. As if she is trying to balance her stoop. Stoop means ઝૂકવું તે, to bend. સ્ટૂપનો મતલબ થાય બેન્ડ. દાદીમાં છે ને આમ બેન્ડ વળી ગયેલા હતા, કમરથી વળી ગયેલા હતા. And she wanted to balance her stoop. That's why she rested her hand on her waist. કમર ઉપર પોતાનું wrist અથવા તો પામ, હથેળી એ મૂકીને ચાલતા હતા. The other, અને બીજો હાથ telling the beads of a rosary. Rosary, you understand? Rosary આપણે ગુજરાતીમાં જેને માળા કહીએ ને, માળા ફેરવવી તે માળા, અને બીડ્સ એટલે એના મણકાઓ. ટેલ ધ બીડ્સનો મતલબ થાય માળા ફેરવવી તે. So this is again the description of both the hands. So let's start from the very first. She was short, fat, slightly bent. See, short, fat, slightly bent. You will be asked to write down the physical appearance of the grandma. You have to use these three words. She was short, she was fair, she was slightly bent. And then you have to come to the face. The face was very wrinkled one, right? And then you have to give the description of her attire. That means cloth is spotless, white cloth is she used to wear, and walking style she was hobbling, and one hand telling the beads of the rosary, and the another one it was rested on her waist to balance her stoop. And now again there is some more description about her physical appearance. Her silver locks, silver you understand that is white. આપણે જેને ગુજરાતીમાં સફેદ વાળ કહીએ ને ઇંગ્લિશ વ્હાઇટ હેર ન થાય. માથાના વાળ માટે એમ ના કહી શકાય કે એના માથાના વાળ સફેદ છે. એનું ઇંગ્લિશ ઇટ કેન નોટ બી લાઇક દેટ શી હેઝ વ્હાઇટ હેર. એનું ઇંગ્લિશ એમ થાય શી હેઝ ગ્રે હેર ઓર સિલ્વર હેર. લોક્સ આપણે જેને ઝુલ્ફો કહીએ ને, ઝુલ્ફો એને ઇંગ્લિશમાં લોક્સ કહેવાય. સિલ્વર યુ અન્ડરસ્ટેન્ડ વ્હાઇટ, અને લોક્સ અહીંયા એ હેરના અર્થમાં આવેલું છે, હેર વાળ. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. એના જે વાળ હતા એ સફેદ રંગના હતા, and they were scattered untidily. That means they were not neat. Untidily means not neat. That means not combed properly. વાળને દાંતિયાથી ઓળાવીને રાખેલા નહોતા, but they were scattered. Scattered means વિખરાયેલા હતા. And how was her face? Pale. ફીકો ચહેરો હતો અને પકડ ફેસ. પકડ you understand? See at my face. Suppose I have teeth, but suppose somebody is not having teeth, then આ બે હોઠ હોય ને આમ થઈ જાય. That is પકડ face. So the face was pale and puckered face, right? And her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Audible means which can be heard. Inaudible means that cannot be heard. તો દાદીમાં છે ને એના વાળ સફેદ હતા. પછી એના વાળની વાત કરે છે તો વાળ સફેદ હતા અને ઓળાવેલા ન હોય ને એવી રીતે અસ્તવ્યસ્ત વાળ એના હતા. ચહેરો નિસ્તેજ ચહેરો હતો, because she is not young now, and her face was puckered, and the lips were constantly moving. Why moving? Because she was always singing some prayer. But if you stand very close to her further, you can hear that she is murmuring something, but you cannot catch the words. That means it is inaudible prayer. Yeah, she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains. See what is the simile here? She was like the winter landscape in the mountains. કોઈ પર્વતો હોય અને પર્વતોમાં શિયાળામાં કેમ ચારે બાજુ બરફ છવાયેલો હોય અને લેન્ડસ્કેપ એટલે કુદરતી દ્રશ્ય કેવું અદ્ભુત લાગે. She was so beautiful. An expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. એક પર્વત હોય, ત્યાં ખૂબ બરફ જામેલો હોય, ખૂબ સુંદર દ્રશ્ય હોય, અત્યંત શાંત હોય, પવિત્ર લાગતું હોય. બસ દાદીમાં આના જેવા જ હતા. Expanse of pure white serenity. Expanse, you understand? The expanse, that means the expanse of the land. જમીનનો જે વિસ્તાર હતો એ કેવો હતો? With pure serenity. Serenity means peace. એકદમ શાંત. Breathing peace and contentment. Contentment, you understand? સંતોષ જેને આપણે ગુજરાતીમાં કહીએ ને તે સંતોષ. Once you look at the face of this grandma, you can feel she is breathing peace and contentment. She is very serene, very peaceful. Yeah, she was extremely beautiful. So this is the description of the physical appearance of the grandma. If you are asked to give the vivid description of the grandmother as Khushwant Singh had described, then what you have to include? You have to include the grandmother look was short, she was fat, she was slightly bent, and there were so many wrinkles on her face. And then you have to say, she looked very old. And it was very hard for Khushwant Singh to believe that she was ever young and she was ever having a husband also. And then you have to give the description of her walking style. You have to say that she hobbled in the house, and then you have to describe the clothes, spotless white dress she used to wear. One hand on her waist to balance her stoop, the other was always busy telling the beads of the rosary. And then you have to give the description of the hair, વાળ કેવા હતા, silver locks. They were always scattered untidily because she was not in the habit of combing them. Her face was pale and puckered, and her lips constantly moving in inaudible prayer. But she was extremely beautiful, and the author has compared the grandma with the landscape in the winter mountains, expanse of pure white serenity found everywhere, as if grandma was breathing peace and contentment. So this is the description of the grandma's physical appearance. Now there is another move, and here in this paragraph we will be able to find out what is the proximity, how is the relation between grandma and this author, Khushwant Singh. My grandmother and I were good friends. હું અને મારા દાદીમાં ખૂબ સારા મિત્રો હતા. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. So what happened? Khushwant Singh's parent went into the city, and they left this child with grandma. So they were constantly together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. હવે આ ગામડામાં રહેતા હતા. You understand what is the use of used to? Used to is used to describe the past habit or the actions that kept on happening on a regular basis. For example, if I can say, I used to play cricket when I was young. જ્યારે હું નાનો હતો ત્યારે હું ક્રિકેટ રમતો. That means now I don't play. I used to take tea twice in a day when I was in college. જ્યારે હું કોલેજમાં હતો ત્યારે હું દિવસમાં 2 વખત ચા પીતો. So that is the use of used to. She used to wake me up, means દાદીમાં મને જગાડતા in the morning સવારમાં and get me ready for school, and that was her everyday routine. દાદીમાં મને સવારમાં જગાડતા અને મને સ્કૂલ માટે રેડી કરતા, તૈયાર કરતા. She said her morning prayer in the monotonous sing song while she bathed and dressed me, in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. See, this is the mentality of this grandma. સવારમાં લેખકને ઉઠાડવાના, એને નવડાવતા હોય ત્યારે અને કપડાં પહેરાવતા હોય ત્યારે એ પ્રાર્થના ગાતા, સિંગ સેંગ મેનરમાં. સિંગ સોંગ મેનર એટલે એ એવી રીતે ગાતા કે પેલો એને સાંભળે. અને what was the intention of the grandma? The intention was that the writer should learn it by heart so that he himself can recite it. I listened because I loved her voice, but never bothered to learn it. This is the intention of the writer. Intention of the grandma was that this child should learn this prayer by heart and he should be able to recite it. Yes. On the other part, what was the intention of the writer? He listened this prayer because he loved the voice of grandma. But he never intended or he never bothered, tasbih levi, to learn it by heart. અને અમે નાના બાળકો એટલે એને આમ પ્રાર્થના કરાવડાવીને, પ્રાર્થના ગોખાવડાવીને, બોલાવડાવીને, they are just not willing to learn all these things, right? Go back to your childhood. તમને કોઈ એમ કીધું કે આ પ્રેયરને તમારે you have to mug up or learn it by heart, then it seems something like a burden. So, what was the intention of a writer listening to the song or prayer? Because he loved her voice. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk. Then what would happen? Grandma say, would fetch means bring. Fetch means bring. My wooden slate. હવે તમે અત્યારે જે ભણો છો ને ત્યારે તમારે બધું નોટબુક્સમાં લખવાનું આવે છે. When we were young, हमारे ज़माने में, perhaps you might have remembered one character in तारक मेहता का उल्टा चश्मा पेला मास्टर जी છે ને ભીડે. हमारे ज़माने में वो સ્લેટ हुआ करती थी, વુડન લાકડાની સ્લેટ આવતી હતી અને એ લાકડાની સ્લેટ અને એમાં હોય શું લાકડાની સ્લેટમાં કેન આઈ રાઇટ હિયર એક આ રીતે લંબચોરસ હોય, આ જે ફ્રેમ હોય ને એ લાકડાની હોય. આઈ એમ નોટ અ ગુડ પેઇન્ટર, ડોન્ટ માઇન્ડ ઇટ. આ લાકડાની એની ફ્રેમ હોય, રાઈટ. અને વચ્ચે અહીંયા કાળું હોય, આ બધું આ ઠીકરાનું બનેલું હોય. ઠીકરું અન્ડરસ્ટેન્ડ, અથાર માટીનું બનાવેલું હોય અને એને ફાયર્ડ કરેલું હોય, એટલે એ વેરી સ્ટ્રોંગ. અને આના ઉપર સફેદ કે પીળા ચોકથી વન કેન રાઇટ. એટલે આ સ્લેટ હતી, ઇફ યુ હેવ સીન ઇટ. I was, yeah. Then she would fetch my wooden slate. પેલી લાકડાની જે સ્લેટ હોય દાદીમાં એ લઈ આવે, which she had already washed. and દાદી એ પેલું સ્લેટ હોય ને એ દાદીમાં એ ધોઈ નાખ્યું અને પ્લાસ્ટરિંગ કરી લીધું વિથ યલો ચોક. એટલે પેલું જે ડસ્ટ એની જે હોય એ બધી જતી રહી હોય. ટાઈની અથન ઇંકપોટ, અને નાનું એવું ઇંકપોટ એને લીધું હોય માટીનું બનાવેલું કોડિયા જેવું. એન્ડ રેડ પેન, બીજી લાલ કલરની પેન પણ એમાં રાખેલી હોય. અને જ્યારે નાના હતા ત્યારે ભણતા ત્યારે બે પ્રકારની પેન આવતી, ઇફ યુ કેન આસ્ક યોર પેરેન્ટ્સ. લાલ કલરની પેન હોય અને એક વ્હાઇટ કલરની પેન હોય. તો આ લાલ કલરની પેન લેતા, ટાઈ ધેમ ઇન અ બંડલ, એક એનું પોટલું બનાવી દેતા એને હેન્ડ ઇટ ટુ મી, અને મને હાથમાં આપી દેતા. After a breakfast of a thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs. અને દાદીમા અને દીકરો બે તૈયાર થઈ જાય. દાદીમા છે એ આને નવડાવીને તૈયાર કરી દે, કપડાં પહેરાવડાવી દે. દરમિયાનમાં પેલી ઇનઓડિબલ પ્રેયર ચાલતી હોય. ઇન્ટેન્શન વોઝ દેટ ધ ચાઇલ્ડ શુડ લર્ન ઇટ બાય હાર્ટ એન્ડ હી શુડ બી એબલ ટુ રિસાઇટ ઇટ સમડે. But it was another thing that this person, writer, when he was quite a child, he was not interested in learning it by heart. Then the grandmother would fetch the slate and pen, and she will tie them in a bundle and hand it to the author. And after the breakfast, and what was in the breakfast? નાસ્તામાં શું હતું? થિક જાડી સ્ટેલ. સ્ટેલ યુ અન્ડરસ્ટેન્ડ? વાસી આપણે જેને કહીએ ને તે વાસી ચપાટી એટલે રોટલી. ગઈકાલે રાત્રે જે રોટલી બનાવી હોય એ જાડી અને વાસી રોટલી હોય, એના ઉપર થોડું ઘણું બટર અને સુગર, ખાંડ અને સ્પ્રેડ કરી દીધી હોય. દેટ ઇઝ ધ બ્રેકફાસ્ટ. એ બ્રેકફાસ્ટ પતાવીને વી વેન્ટ ટુ સ્કૂલ. શી કેરીડ સેવરલ સ્ટેલ ચપાટીસ, અને દાદીમાએ ભેગી બીજી વાસી રોટલી પણ પોતાની સાથે લીધેલી હોય વિથ હર ફોર ધ વિલેજ ડોગ્સ. જ્યારે સ્કૂલેથી પાછા આવતા ત્યારે રસ્તામાં એ આ કૂતરાઓને વાસી રોટલીઓ ખવડાવતા જતા હતા. ઇટ વોઝ ધ ટ્રેડિશન, ઓર ઇટ ઇઝ ધ ડિસ્ક્રિપ્શન ઓફ વિલેજ લાઈફ ઓલ્સો. માય ગ્રાન્ડમધર ઓલવેઝ વેન્ટ ટુ સ્કૂલ વિથ મી બિકોઝ ધ સ્કૂલ વોઝ અટેચ ટુ ધ ટેમ્પલ. દાદીમા અને દીકરો બંને એક સાથે નીકળી પડતા અને દાદીમા હંમેશા સ્કૂલે જતા. વોટ વોઝ ધ રીઝન? બિકોઝ ધ ટેમ્પલ એન્ડ સ્કૂલ they were attached together. The writer is talking about not the present time when we have separate schools. Earlier what was happening, there was some preaching. Religious teaching is called preaching. The place where religious preaching was done, it was called school. So school and temple, in a way they were not different places. So the grandmother went with this child on the same route because the destination was one and same. The school and the temple were attached. In some part of the temple, the priest would be teaching the kids, and that portion is called school here. The priest you understand, pujari je ત્યાં હોય તે, priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer. See, this is the syllabus of that time. એ વખતનો સિલેબસ શું હતો કે આલ્ફાબેટ. સો દેટ મીન્સ લિટરસી શુડ બી લર્ન ફર્સ્ટ. એને ક ખ ગ શીખડાવી દેવાના, એન્ડ મોર્નિંગ પ્રેયર. સો what was in the name of the syllabus in primary level? So that was alphabet. That means literacy. It has not been mentioned here, but after literacy there was numeracy. But એકડા શીખડાવી દેવાના અને alphabet શીખડાવી દેવાનો. And some part of a religion, that was morning prayer here. While the children sat in rows, બાળકો rows, you understand, lines. row લાઇનમાં બેઠા હોય, and either side of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayer in chorus. Chorus, you understand, all together, that is chorus. આપણે કહેતા ને એક સાથે ગાવું તે, that is chorus. તો બાળકો શું કરતા, પેલી જે મંદિરની જે વેરંડા યુ અન્ડરસ્ટેન્ડ, ઓસરી આપણે જેને કહીએ તે કવર્ડ પાર્ટ આઉટ ઓફ ધ રૂમની બહારનો જે કવર્ડ પોર્શન હોય, દેટ ઇઝ કોલ્ડ વેરંડા. ગુજરાતીમાં આપણે એને ઓસરી કહીએ છીએ તે. તો ઓસરીની અંદર બાળકો લાઇનબંધ કતારબંધ બેઠેલા હોય, અને ધ પ્રિસ્ટ વોઝ મેકિંગ ધેમ સિંગ ધ સોંગ્સ, સિંગ ધ પ્રેયર્સ એન્ડ આલ્ફાબેટ. ક કલમનો ક, ખ ખટારાનો ખ, ગ ગણપતિનો ગ. દેટ ઇઝ ધ સિંગિંગ મેથડ of teaching alphabet, right? A for apple, B for banana, C for cat, like that. And the morning prayer also. But all the children will be would have been singing in a chorus. એક સાથે એ ગાતા હોય છે. My grandmother sat inside reading the scripture. Scripture, you understand, the religious literature. ધર્મનું જે સાહિત્ય હોય ને, that is called scriptures. For example, Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Gita, and all these things. Quran, all these things can be called scriptures. So scriptures, you understand, the religious literature. દાદીમાં છે અંદર બેઠા હોય મંદિરની અંદરમાં, અને એ રિલિજિયસ સ્ક્રિપ્ચર્સ વાંચતા, લિટરેચર વાંચતા. વેન વી હેડ બોથ ફિનિશ્ડ, અમે અમારું ભણવાનું પૂરું કરીએ, એન્ડ દાદીમાં છે એને વાંચવાનું પૂરું કરીએ, વી વુડ વોક બેક ટુગેધર. હું ને દાદીમાં વળી પાછા મંદિર કે સ્કૂલથી ઘરે પાછા નીકળીએ. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. અને મંદિરના દરવાજામાંથી અમે જેવા બહાર નીકળીએ ત્યારે ગામડાના જે પેલા કૂતરાઓ હોય એમને ત્યાં સામે મળે. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis that we threw to them. હવે કૂતરાઓ એને સામે મળ્યા એટલે અમે એને કૂતરાઓને રોટલીના ઘા કરતા, એમને આપતા ખાવા માટે. તો they would be growling and fighting. Growling મતલબ ઘુરક્યા કરવા, મોઢું બંધ રાખ જે કરતા હોય, that is called growling, and fighting with each other for the chapati that we throw to him. So in this paragraph you have been given the description of the village life, village school, village syllabus. અને પેલો આ જે પેરેગ્રાફ હતો, in the very first paragraph, this is the bondage between the grandmother and the grandson. So what was the bondage? દાદીમાં છે પહેલાંને સવારમાં વેકઅપ કરતા, જગાડતા, એન્ડ એને નવડાવતા, કપડાં પહેરાવડાવતા, અને ડ્યુરિંગ દેટ ટાઈમ શી ઓલવેઝ recite some prayer in a monotonous sing-song manner. And what was the intention? The intention was that this child should learn it by heart, and he would be able to recite it. But it is a different thing that the writer was not willing to learn it by heart, but he loved her voice and never bothered to learn it. પછી પેલાને લાકડાની પાટી લઈ આવી દેતા, એને ધોઈ દેતા, સાફ કરી દેતા, લાલ કલરની એની પેન એને આપતા, એક બંડલમાં, મતલબ નાની એવી થેલી હોય એમાં નાખીને એને હાથમાં આપતા. થોડી રોટલી પોતાના હાથમાં લેતા, ને એકાદી રોટલી, વાસી રોટલી, એના ઉપર બટર અને સુગર સ્પ્રેડ કરીને બ્રેકફાસ્ટમાં આપી દેતા ને બોથ વુડ ગો ટુ ધ સ્કૂલ adjoining to the temple. અને વોટ વોઝ હેપનિંગ ઇન ધ સ્કૂલ, તો પેલા પ્રિસ્ટ હોય એ છોકરાઓને લાઇનમાં બેસાડતા, રાઈટ, અને યુ વુડ મેક ધેમ સિંગ ધ આલ્ફાબેટ એન્ડ મોર્નિંગ પ્રેયર ઓલ્સો. અને દાદીમાં છે એ મંદિરમાં બેસતા, રિલિજિયસ સ્ક્રિપ્ચર્સ એ વાંચતા, અને જે બે પૂરું કરતા then again they would walk together back to the home. અને રસ્તામાં એને મંદિરની બહાર જ નીકળતા ત્યારે એને કૂતરા મળતા. પહેલાં દાદીમાએ જે વાસી બીજી રોટલીઓ લીધેલી હોય કૂતરાઓ માટે અહીંયા એને આપતા. અને વોટ વોઝ ધ ડોગ્સ ડુઈંગ? they were growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis. So this is the description of the initial bonding between the grandmother and the author. And in the next paragraph there was the description of the temple and school, or we can say the routine at school and the temple. You have to remember all this stuff because you will be asked to write the questions. And now the story takes a big turn here. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. હવે લેખક જે છે, ઓથર છે, he has been staying with the grandmother in the village because the parents were not settled in the city. Now they have been comfortably settled in the city, so they sent for us. એટલે અમને એને બોલાવડાવી લીધા. સેન્ટ ફોર અસ એટલે અમને બોલાવડાવી લીધા સિટીમાં. There was a turning point in our friendship. અને હવે દાદીમાના અને રાઇટરના રિલેશનમાં there was a turning point. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. They were sharing the same room. મતલબ એક જ રૂમમાં દાદીમા અને હજી ખુશવંતસિંહ બે રહે છે. But now it is not possible for the grandmother to leave this child to the school. Why? Because I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. હવે આ એક ઇંગ્લિશ મીડિયમ સ્કૂલમાં ભણી રહ્યો છે ખુશવંતસિંહ એઝ અ ચાઇલ્ડ, અને હવે એને બસમાં બેસીને ત્યાં જવાનું છે. It is not a small village. It is a big city, and there was a city bus, a school bus હતી. There were no dogs in the streets, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. દાદીમાનું રૂટીન પણ બદલાઈ ગયું, બિકોઝ ગામડામાં શું થતું હતું, એને દરરોજ મંદિરે જવાનું છે, અને મંદિરને અજોઇનિંગ એ જ એની સ્કૂલ છે, રાઈટ. બટ હિયર ઇટ ઇઝ નોટ સો. The temple is not the same place of the school. Temple is a different thing here in city. School is a different thing here in city. And the second thing is, the child is not learning alphabet only or religious scriptures only. He has been learning something else also. And Dadima, this grandma, is not interested in that kind of learning. And the second thing is that now the place, the school, is far away from their house. It was not earlier so in the village. So Dadima is not coming with him. So there is a kind of breach, turning point in their friendship, in their relationship. There are no street dogs. Yeah, she wanted to do some charity. Earlier she was feeding the dogs, but now dogs are not found. So she started feeding the sparrows in our courtyard. Courtyard to understand, તમે પેલું ફળિયું જેને કહો ગુજરાતીમાં, એ અમારા સિટીના ઘરમાં એક ફળિયું હતું, તો દાદીમાં એક કૂતરાને નહીં, તો હવે ચકલીઓને ફીડિંગ કરાવવાનું, એને ખવડાવવાનું ચાલુ કરી દીધું. As the years rolled by means passed by, જેમ જેમ વર્ષો પસાર થતા ગયા, we saw less of each other. પહેલાં તો દાદીમાં અને દીકરો બંને સાથે સાથે રહેતા હતા. Now they saw less of each other. Now they are not in the close company of each other. For some time she continued to wake me up. કેટલાક સમય સુધી દાદીમાં મને જગાડતા રહેતા હતા, and get me ready for school, અને મને સ્કૂલ માટે તૈયાર પણ કરતા હતા. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. અને જ્યારે હું સ્કૂલથી આવતો, દાદીમાં મને પૂછતા પણ ખરા કે ટીચરે મને શું શીખવ્યું. I would tell her English words. Writer used to tell the Dadima, her that the teacher made him learn English words, the little things of Western science. And such learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world being round, etc. લેખક ઘરે આવે, દાદીમાં પૂછતા શું ભણાવ્યું, તો લેખક એને એવું કહેતો કે ભાઈ મને તો ઇંગ્લિશના થોડા શબ્દો ભણાવ્યા, થોડુંક સાયન્સ ભણાવ્યું, ગ્રેવિટી, ગુરુત્વાકર્ષણ, વોટ યુ કોલ ઇન ગુજરાતી, ગુરુત્વાકર્ષણના લોઝ શીખડાવ્યા, આર્કિમિડીસનો પ્રિન્સિપલ મને શીખડાવ્યો, એન્ડ ઇટ વોઝ ઓલ્સો ટોલ્ડ મી દેટ ધ વર્લ્ડ ઇઝ નોટ ફ્લેટ બટ ઇટ ઇઝ રાઉન્ડ. This made her unhappy because this grandma could not digest. Is this the stuff the children should be taught? No. There should be something in the name of religion. But the religion scripture was not a part of the syllabus here in the city school, English medium school. So she became unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. Earlier it was very easy for the grandma to help the child in the homework, because what was there? There was alphabet, there was religious teaching, and grandma knew all the things. But here grandma does not know English, grandma does not know the law of gravity. It is very clear that she does not know the principle of Archimedes. So how can she teach, or how can she help the child learn this English education? So it was very difficult. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed. She was very much distressed. That means she became very unhappy that there was no teaching about God and the scripture. દાદીમાં જૂના માનસવાળા હતા. She was an old person. She did not like it. She could not digest it. આવા પ્રકારનું teaching હોય. There is no teaching about God. There is no teaching about scriptures. There is no teaching about religion. If there is nothing in the name of God or scriptures or religion, that is not the teaching at all. She believed so. So she was unhappy. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. હવે આ તો બોમ્બ ફૂટી ગયો ઘરમાં. એક દિવસ when this child went home, દાદીમાએ પૂછ્યું શું ભણાવ્યું. આણે કહ્યું કે અમને મ્યુઝિકનું લેસન શીખડાવ્યું. She was very disturbed. દાદીમા became very much disturbed. To her, music had lewd association. દાદીમા એવું માનતા હતા કે મ્યુઝિક તો લ્યુડ એસોસિએશન એટલે હલકી જાતિના લોકો હોય એ મ્યુઝિક વગાડે. એ મ્યુઝિક, એ ગાવાનું કામ તો એ લોકોએ કરવાનું હોય છે. જેન્ટલ ફોકે નથી કરવાનું. ભિખારી લોકો હોય, હલકટ પ્રકારના લોકો હોય, મ્યુઝિક એમનો વ્યવસાય છે. દેટ વોઝ ધ ફિક્સ્ડ ફ્રેમ in her mind. It was very difficult for her to digest this music, and that is also the part of the education. That is the part of the teaching. Oh, this is terrible. She could not digest it. Why? Music had lewd association. She believed so. Lewd association, હલકટ લોકોનો વ્યવસાય. She believed so. It was the monopoly of harlots, beggars, and not meant for gentlefolk. To her, for grandma, what was music? It was the monopoly of harlots only. Harlots, you understand, પેલા રજવાડાઓના જમાનામાં નાચવા ગાવાવાળી જે સ્ત્રીઓ હોય એને harlots કહેવાતી. And beggars. And it was not meant for the gentlefolk. If the gentlemen are there, they should not sing, they should not learn music. આ દાદીમાના દિમાગમાં ફિક્સ થયેલું હતું. She said nothing. But see how gentle she is. She said nothing. But her silence meant disapproval. She became silent. અને એનું જે સાયલન્સ હતું, it meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. અને ત્યાર પછી દાદીમાએ ક્યારેય લેખકારે વાત દિલથી કરી હોય એવું લેખકને હવે યાદ નથી. મતલબ દાદીમાએ હવે જ્યારે જોયું કે આ જે છોકરો છે એ હવે નવું નવું શીખવા લાગ્યો છે. He has been studying in English medium school. He has been learning English words. He has been learning the subject of science, laws of gravity, Archimedes principle. Everything is different. She was distressed a bit. But when she learned that this boy has been learning the music also, it was unbearable for her. She stopped talking to this person, her grandson. She rarely talked to me after that. See guys, this is part 1 for today. In next lecture, that means tomorrow itself, that will be the another part. I insist you to read the textbook again, and if you cannot understand anything, then you can always send me the message via WhatsApp. Thank you very much for today.